So today I'm going to break down the top 10 questions that I've gotten over the last few months for somebody that's trying to come out here. And what happened with me, what I kind of expected from Vietnam, and what actually was the reality of it. Question number one, what is the cost of living in Vietnam compared to my home country? Your cost of living is going to go down drastically. 1 month of your salary cost of living in those countries would hold you down for like 2 to 3, maybe even up to 5 months out here in Vietnam, depending where you live. If you went to the countryside, you could ideally, for like 7 to 10 months, live on like $1,200. It's completely possible. Vietnamese people do it all the time. But if you are coming out here to try to kind of have a mix of the Vietnamese culture with the Western life, you're probably looking at least like $1,200 to $1,300 a month is kind of a good hit, kind of a give and take. Covers your expenses, your time going out, your exploring, your tourism stuff, your rent. You have an AC on because it does get hot out here. This is something that kind of caught me off guard, and I expected it, but it did catch me off guard a little bit. Is when you first move into an apartment out here, it can be expensive. A lot of Westerners get mixed up with agents, so they're finding these apartments that are like $500-$700 a month when they shouldn't be. Like rent out here typically is between $100 to $300 a month for like a 2-bedroom house. And this is a legit number. If you pay more than that, you're either one, in a big city, like you're in the center of Hanoi or Saigon or something like that, or two, you just don't know anybody. And that's kind of the thing. So you have to expect that. I feel personally my first couple months were the most expensive I ever had. But after I started making local friends and calling family back home, and they knew people that were living here, yada, 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 I ended up paying like $200 a month for like a 2-3 bedroom house. That became the norm. Number two, is it easy to find a job in Vietnam, and how hard is it to start a business? Now, when it comes to business, I say this to everybody that don't. If your focus is to open an English center, there's a lot of legalities that are involved with it. And Vietnam has canceled English as a mandated program. So the demand for English centers is going to be very low. English probably isn't a really big demand at all. When it comes to business, come to finding a job, it's getting a little trickier. You do need to have a good CV. You need to have your TOEFL. You can see the link below to get one discounted. And you need to have a pretty solid grasp on what you're doing out here as a teacher. You can't just walk into a classroom as a white or black person from the West and be like, hey, what's up? And they just hire you on the spot. That's starting to become a thing of the past. And again, the links below, check out my ebooks. I've written ebooks on everything relative to this that will get you a job. Get your foot in the door when it comes to what you need to do and have your TOEFL. Number three, what are the visa requirements and how hard is it to obtain one? The visa requirements for a tourist are 1 month and 3 months. It's an e-visa online. You can do it. It's stupid easy. I think it's $25 for single entry and it's $50 for multiple entries. So if you want to come and go. In regards to like a business visa, it's not hard. If you have all your paperwork, it's a pretty fast forward process. There's not much to it. The only catch to all this, though, I say, is if you're on a tourist visa, Vietnam is cutting down on anybody trying to stay past 6 months, which is kind of a normal rule in Asia in general. You can't stay in a lot of Asia past 6 months. Like, if you're working out here, the company you work for will be able to get the process done pretty quick. The requirements are just a TOEFL and a university degree of 4 years. Number four, what are the healthcare systems like in Vietnam? Dental's not bad, actually. Dental's actually quite cheap and it's good to go. You're looking at like $10, $50 to get a lot of stuff done. Root canals are like a couple $100s for the whole process. Fillings and like, what do you call those, like implant teeth or whatever it's called? Probably like $300 or $400. Stupid cheap. When it comes to medical itself, if it's basic stuff, you're pretty good. There's a good hospital, a French one in Saigon. If you need anything serious done, I always recommend just go to Thailand, go to Singapore, go to Japan. Vietnam's healthcare when it comes to serious issues is very limited. Most hospitals, surprisingly in Saigon and Hanoi, can't do much when it comes to serious health. If you start to have a heart attack, they're going to have their, what do you call it, belifitators or whatever you call them, where you shock people. They're going to have that kind of stuff. But if they got to have open heart surgery, you might be on a waiting list because there's only so many doctors that can do this in Vietnam. And they're typically not even Vietnamese. They're French, they're German, they're American, they're Canadian doctors. So it is good. It's cheap. If you need like pharmacy drugs, you can buy them almost at any street corner legally, I guess. But if you are in the West and you need to like import like medications, I always suggest Thailand is a cheaper route. If you have any serious medical stuff, Thailand, Singapore, Japan is a better spot. Dental, Vietnam is definitely one of the cheapest spots to get it done. It is not bad service either. Number 5, how safe is it in Vietnam for foreigners? Vietnam is one of the safest countries in Asia. The crime in Vietnam is petty. It's just like pickpocketing and stuff like that. There's nothing serious. You're not going to be abducted and sold to China as a wife. Police typically don't bother you. They're quite nervous around Western people, being male or female. So you're not going to have issues there. Walking alone at night as a male or female, you're almost always safe. In regards to safety in Vietnam for a foreigner, yeah, you're fine, man. I wouldn't worry about it. Number 6, what is the culture shock like moving to Vietnam? I grew up in the Vietnamese culture. When I came to Vietnam, everything was kind of expected. It was amplified, obviously. In America, when it comes to Vietnamese culture, you see the same stuff: the pollution, the karaoke, the yelling, the picking your nose, your feet on everything. You see all this stuff. In Vietnam, it's just amplified. I think my culture shock was actually going back to America, because when I grew up in America, my life was 50% Chinese Vietnamese culture, 50% the other side of the culture, the American side, right? So when I went to Vietnam, it was just like it just turned into 100% Vietnamese. So it was just normal, it was just amplified. But when I went back to America, I felt off. I felt weird. Driving, I was always like freaking out when I was driving because I was scared people were going to hit me, or I needed to dude, I ran so many red lights when I got back to California. It was insane. And my family was like, what are you doing? I'm like, it's red. Yeah, stop. And I'll say with a lot of people I've talked to, Westerners, when they come here, they don't typically feel culture shock either, because it's such a explosive change compared to the West. Like you're walking into a university pretty much. Like it's just parties, loud noise, chaos, like there's all that stuff. So you're not really culture shocked. You're just kind of like, wow, like this is cool. And you kind of just adapt to it very quickly. It's almost like unadapting to it's even harder. Number 7, how much Vietnamese do I need to know to get by? You don't need it, especially if you're staying in tourist areas. You don't need to speak a lot of Vietnamese. If you're going to move to the countryside, it's good to know some of the basics, at least, like how to shop, how to pay, how much this stuff costs, how to count money, stuff like that. You should definitely know. The more fluent you become in Vietnamese, the more you don't want to understand it. Once I started talking more to Vietnamese and understanding more of the language directly in Vietnam, it was just gossip. Like, I didn't care. So I don't really speak Vietnamese anymore. And when I talk to people, I don't announce that I speak Vietnamese. I understand what they're saying. I know when they're talking shit. And it typically is what it is. It's shit talking and gossiping. But I don't announce I can speak it. So I don't use it as much. So do you need it? Do you need to know it to get by here? No. Not at all. I don't think so. But it can benefit you to understand how to say things like, again, counting money, things that you need to say at a market. So if I was to tell you to learn like 100 words of Vietnamese, it should be relative to counting money and shopping. Those are the 2 things you should focus on. Past that, formalities, I guess, but past that, you don't need to learn any other vocabulary. It's not needed. Number 8, is it easy to make friends or build a social network in Vietnam? This is a yes and no. You kind of just heard what I said about Vietnamese gossip a lot. That's kind of what happens out here. So that's kind of the environment you're going to deal with. If you're making friends with expats, definitely. I have a lot of expat friends, but they come and go, which is kind of I have a WhatsApp full of like hundreds of people's phone numbers for people I've met in Vietnam. And I'm pretty sure 99% of them don't live in Vietnam no more. In regards to like Vietnamese friends, you definitely can. I have obviously more long-term Vietnamese friends out here, but you are kind of dealing with the redundancy of the lifestyle that they live. Like for me personally, the hardest part about having a lot of Vietnamese friends is a lot of them are motivated. They don't want to like hustle. They don't want to like invest, learn, improve their lives. Like they're okay with A to B. That's something that is really hard. When I talk to Vietnamese, they're asking, what am I doing? I'm like, oh, I'm learning this new skill, or I'm investing in this, or I'm doing this and that. They always look at me like, why? Why don't you just come to karaoke with us? You know, so that is kind of an issue. So to make friends and build social circles in Vietnam is very, very limited. And the friends that you do make are going to be short-lived. Number 9, what is the food like in Vietnam? How does it cater to dietary restrictions? When it comes to dietary restrictions, it's almost impossible. Like unless you go to an Indian ran restaurant, you're not going to find anything. In Hanoi, you can go to like a Muslim restaurant and sometimes get like that halal food. What does halal mean? Like good food, acceptable food. I think some of the best food I've ever had has been at a Muslim restaurant, but they're not common, man. If you're in the countryside, you're eating whatever the hell is given to you at that point. So if you're like a vegan or like something like that, it's going to be quite hard for you. People also will look at you weird. Like I live on a keto diet, so I don't eat rice, bread, and noodles really ever. And it's very awkward for them because we'll go out and I'll just eat vegetables and meat. And they're like, you don't want rice? I'm like, no. Like really, who eats rice? Like, it's just sugar, compounded with sugar, which is compounded with starch, which is a high sugar. Also, food quality is some of the worst in Vietnam and China in general. Like, you have gutter oil, you have recycled oil, you got transport trucks that are transporting motor oil and then putting food oil into it and then selling it. And finally, number 10, how does the quality of life in Vietnam compare to other countries in Southeast Asia? You guys ever seen ADV China where that separate Z guy always says the skies don't lie? It's the same thing in Vietnam. Like, the air pollution is pretty nasty out here to the point you get used to it. So you're just slowly developing cancer by choice. The ground quality of like pollution is horrible. Trash is burned in rice fields, so the food quality is typically horrible. So you're not only eating sugar, starch, which is sugar, you're also eating like plastic, microplastics, stuff like that. In regards to like the food, it's pretty bad. The quality of life in general, it's stressful for a lot of people. It is not normal. It's typically loud. It's not relaxing. I meet a lot of people that want to retire in Vietnam. And their idea is like get a white picket fence in the countryside like Hoi An or Da La and get married, have kids, and relax. And it doesn't end up that way. It typically, for the first like 3 to 6 months, it will. And then when people start realizing, hey, there's a Western living here, Vietnamese tend to flock to you and start building shit around you because they think, oh, this means it's a rich area. This is a culture phenomenon. Whenever there's a high tourist interaction, Vietnamese will build around it. Sapa is a great example. Da Lat's a great example. Pho Qua Island is a great example of this happening in the last decade. Whenever there's a high level of tourism, the government typically builds up hotels around it. It turns into a tourist trap. And Vietnamese do this when you move it to like countryside. They'd be like, oh, there's this Australian guy living here with a Vietnamese wife. We're going to build Australian restaurants next to it. And then other Vietnamese copy each other when it comes to business. Like, this is why you'll see in Vietnam like a pho restaurant next to a pho restaurant next to a pho restaurant next to a nail salon next to a nail salon next to a nail salon. They copy each other. There's no creativity in Vietnam. So with all of that being said, the quality of life in Vietnam is pretty subpar. I would never recommend living out here long term. Most intelligent Western people live out here for like 5 to 7 years, get married to Vietnamese people, citizens, and then they move back to Australia, they move back to America, Canada, whatever it is. Like, they leave because they realize, like, I've never met an older person out here that retired, got married, and didn't just go back. And the reason for it was just they were concerned about their health. It's typically what it is. So the quality of life is horrible in Vietnam. When I went back to America for 6 months when my mother was sick, I literally de-aged. My health improved tenfold. I started losing weight randomly. Like, everything just happened. My face started to clear up. Like, I felt better. My nose got better. Everything improved in those 6 months. And when I came back to Vietnam, the problems came back. So hopefully it answers those 10 questions. Let me know if you have any other questions about this thing. So with that being said, guys, I'm going to get out of here. Thanks for watching. I will see you again.